I call Jami-Lee Ross.
Mr Speaker, we are now on the third day of debate on this bill. It's been debated on Tuesday, debated on Wednesday. Here we are on Thursday for the third reading. And Mr Speaker, I remain concerned and actually saddened by the condescending and insulting approach that the Labour Party has to the desire for young Kiwi homeowners to be able to bring together a deposit to be able to buy a home. Because, Mr Speaker, that is exactly what the government's policy is with the Homestart policy. That is exactly what this bill supports, the policy which will enable New Zealanders to get more of a deposit together. And, Mr Speaker, the condescending and insulting approach from the Labour Party is rather saddening. Mr Twyford called it inconsequential. Well, Mr Speaker, we estimate that over the next 5 years, 90,000 New Zealanders will benefit from the changes that we're bringing into place. For a couple each earning $50,000 a year that have been in Kiwisaver for 5 years, Mr Speaker, they will be able to withdraw a significant amount of money, $35,000. Add on to that, Mr Speaker, the doubling of the grants that we're putting in place, which would allow that same couple to have $20,000 in grants over that 5-year period from the government. Mr Speaker, that is a $55,000 deposit. Now, I challenge any member in this House to stand up and say that for first home buyers, young first home buyers wanting to buy their first home, I challenge any member in this House to stand up and say a $55,000 deposit for their first home is inconsequential. Inconsequential. That is insulting, that is condescending, and that is absolutely wrong. Mr Speaker, the 90,000 New Zealanders that will benefit from this Homestart scheme, Mr Speaker, will be much better off than they would have been had we done nothing. Yes, an argument can be made that this bill only tackles part of the Homestart scheme, but Mr Speaker, the legislation only needed to be changed for part of the Homestart scheme. The wider changes we're putting in place around the doubling of the Homestart grants, Mr Speaker, that is also important and can be done through other methods. But Mr Speaker, to say that is inconsequential is absolutely insulting, and I'm saddened by that. I remember, just as I'm sure many other members in this House remember, the time when we all went to buy our first home, getting that first deposit together was one of the most challenging things. Once you get on the ladder, it's a whole lot easier, but Mr Speaker, us, through the government changes that we're putting in place with Homestart, will help those people a long way, and Mr Speaker, they will be better off because of it. I do want to counter some of the arguments that the opposition have been running this week, not just today, this week in the House, around housing. Because, Mr Speaker, they have a holier-than-thou approach to housing. They believe they had all the solutions in the 2000s and we're doing it all wrong now. Well, Mr Speaker, let's just remind New Zealanders listening today that when Labour was in office, house prices doubled. House prices went up 96% in the 9 years that they were in office. Young New Zealanders wanting to buy homes were seeing house prices skyrocketing, going through the roof when they were in office. In the time we've been in office, average house prices have increased by 27%. Contrast that, Mr Speaker. If they want to come into the House and say they had all the solutions over their 9 years when house prices doubled and went up by 96%, Mr Speaker, I'd like to know what the solutions they believe they have are now, because if that's what they were doing when they were in office 9 years ago, doubling house prices, what on earth would they want to do to New Zealanders now? Mr Speaker, I do believe and I do concur with many in this House that talk about the fact that we have supply issues in New Zealand. That is absolutely what we are addressing with many of our solutions in the housing framework. Mr Speaker, take, for example, the special housing areas. That has led to huge amounts of development taking off in parts of Auckland and in other parts of the country where the special housing areas are taking place. Mr Speaker, I challenge Mr Twyford and I challenge David Clark to come to the Botany electorate, to come to the Hunua electorate, to come to the East Coast Bays electorate, those electorates where we are seeing development taking off through the special housing areas. Mr Speaker, you cannot drive down some streets very easily in my electorate because there are cones everywhere where there is development taking place. Mr Speaker, when you stand on some of the hills in my electorate and look over the Flatbush area, all you can see past the initial house roofs is dirt, where dirt is being converted into more housing. You can see thousands of houses being built in our electorate. We are getting houses being built. 24,000 consents were issued last year for construction in Auckland. The number of consents are up by 20%. Houses are being built. That is absolutely what we need. But the concern I have around housing and supply are the types of policies pursued by the left in New Zealand, the types of policies advocated by the Labour parties and the Green parties of the world, where they would like to see what they like to call smart growth take place, the compact cities that they like to envisage when they sit there with their planning documents. Mr Speaker, one of the biggest problems we have with housing in New Zealand, particularly in Auckland, is that for year after year, decade after decade, local government, assisted by left-wing planning ideology, has seen housing supply, land supply, being constrained through the district planning process. There simply hasn't been enough land opened up for development so that those houses can be built. It's a simple supply and demand equation. We have demand up here where people are wanting to buy houses. We need to build 13,000 houses a year. We simply haven't been keeping up with that demand. One of the reasons is because the supply of land has not been opened up sufficiently. The special housing areas legislation was brought in place to try and override some of those planning constraints that is leading to more housing taking place. But I remain concerned, as many of my constituents remain concerned, that some of the policies that are pursued in the housing space when it comes to land supply, pursued by local government, will not necessarily lead to the solutions we need in Auckland, because more land needs to be opened up. And Mr Speaker, I'm hoping that the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan process that's being followed by independent commissioners will lead to more land being opened up, because that's what we need in Auckland. Mr Speaker, when that new land is opened up, and the 90,000 New Zealanders that will benefit from the Homestart policy are able to go to the bank with their doubled grant from the government through the Kiwisaver scheme, with their funds withdrawn from the Kiwisaver scheme, with their $55,000 deposit that the opposition calls inconsequential, when they are able to go and do that and purchase new homes that are being built, we will see more New Zealanders getting access to housing. Young New Zealanders want to live the Kiwi dream. Many of the members in this House know what it's like to own property. It's important for New Zealanders. It's part of our Kiwi dream, part of the psyche that we have as New Zealanders. This bill is all about trying to make it easier for New Zealanders to get together the money to put a deposit on a house. Other policies we are pursuing will lead to more houses being built. And Mr Speaker, we are seeing development, we are seeing progress being made. I also remain fearful of some of the policies our friends in the opposition wish to pursue. Capital gains taxes will not lead to more development taking place. That will lead to less investment taking place, which will lead to fewer houses being built. Mr Speaker, I also don't trust the Labour Party, if they were ever in government, to build the 100,000 houses they were promising. Mr Speaker, they were promising houses to be built and sold for $300,000 when the average cost of a section in Auckland was $325,000. The mathematics simply didn't add up, and Mr Speaker, I can see why people like Mr David Clark are no longer in the Finance Committee, because, Mr Speaker, they simply didn't have what it took to be able to put through housing policies that will benefit New Zealanders. Mr Speaker, this bill is only part of the solution that we have for housing. Mr Speaker, it is important we build more houses, but we also have to help those young New Zealanders. That is what the Homestart policy is about. That is the primary mechanism being put in place through this bill. And Mr Speaker, as an Auckland member, as a member of the National Party on this side of the House, I'm pleased to see it progressing through the House.
I call Jan Logan.